When I first started my business, I had a period of 54 no's in a row. So 54 people said no to working with me. And so it was call after call of, I'd love to, but I can't afford it, or I don't have the time, all the excuses. And so many of us, we have a block around receiving wealth and abundance. And so it's so important that you actually look at this as soon as possible.
This is the Born to be Brilliant podcast, helping you harness the habits and unlock the tools to bring you more meaning, vibrance, and the personal power to help you shine like the diamond you are. We have got Emily Williams on the show today. She's the founder of I Heart My Life, and she is an absolute expert when it comes to money mindset. Emily, a massive welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. This is a topic that I think is timeless. There are so many conversations about money and how we think about money. And I think anybody in business, we have lots of entrepreneurs and high performers, high achievers that listen to this podcast. And we go through so many stages of understanding like our own behaviors around money, and they change over time and in different seasons of life. So I'd love to unpack this with you today and delve into the nuances about mindset of money, if that would be okay. So let's start kind of like at the foundations. When it comes, what do we mean? What do we mean by money mindset?
Yeah. And I mean, this was a big question for me as well. When I started my business, I had no idea that I had a money story. I didn't know what money mindset was. But I quickly realized as I jumped into the world of entrepreneurship and specifically sales, that there were ways in which I was holding myself back. For example, when I first started my business, I had a period of 54 no's in a row. So 54 people said no to working with me. And so it was call after call of, I'd love to, but I can't afford it, or I don't have the time, all the excuses. And especially the piece around money, I didn't know how to handle that objection. And I didn't know how to go deeper with people. And what I realized was that I had a block around talking about money in general. And when you go into a business with that block specifically, it's very hard to actually make money if you're uncomfortable with the subject of money to begin with. And so we really have to look at, as high achievers, what are the things that we're resistant to when it comes to money? And for me, that big one was talking about money. But once I realized that it was safe to talk about money, it was okay to talk about money, and actually it was my duty to talk about money on these conversations, everything started to shift. So on a foundational level, you first have to ask yourself, what are your beliefs around money? How do you feel in your body when it comes to money or having conversations around money? What are the common thoughts that are running through your mind? How do you talk about money with your friends and family or your spouse? And just get an understanding of what your current money story and belief system actually is.
That's so true. And I bet like a lot of people who are heart-centered entrepreneurs go into business because of something they feel passionate about, right? Something that they feel like they want to make a difference in. It's very passion fueled, and probably don't even think about this bit that much at the beginning. They know that they're going to probably sell that product or service. They're going to ask for money in exchange for it, but it's not until they're in it that they start to kind of go, oh, hang on, what's going on here? And I know for me, that took years of, well, how come this? Oh, there's a pattern here. Like, it's not something we just go, right, okay, before I start my business, let's just check my money beliefs and see where they're at. Is there a time you think that they tend to show up for people in business?
Definitely. And to your point, it's so true. Especially, I work with a lot of heart-centered women, and so many of them, they want to give, they want to support, they want to nurture. And so the idea of sales and even receiving money could be huge for them. It's a huge block. I actually have all my blocks categorized in my actual, money mindset method. And one of them is the receiving block. And so many of us, we have a block around receiving wealth and abundance. And so it's so important that you actually look at this as soon as possible. And, let's be real, when it comes to personal development, the work is really never done. And so there's not like a right or wrong time to look at it. But what I found in my own journey, especially in working with many entrepreneurs, is that the sooner the better, because we want to uncover what story, what's kind of running the show, so to speak, before we actually get into our business. And because we need to, figure out like what is your current capacity to receive. And I know that's a phrase that many people don't hear, so I could define it a little bit more, but like what is your capacity to receive wealth and abundance? If right now you're completely blocked, then, it's going to be very challenging. And to be frank, like any strategy that you put in place, it's going to be harder than it needs to be because you don't have an openness to actually receiving wealth and abundance. So, to answer your question, many times when people start selling or even thinking about selling or think about raising their prices or actually having conversations around sales or getting more visible, all of this stuff starts to creep up. And it's really deep. All of this is set when we're children based on what our parents tell us about money or what society teaches us about money. And so it's very ingrained. It's decades worth of programming, oftentimes generations worth of programming. And so it takes time to start to kind of unravel it and shift some of those deep beliefs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can, like you say, you can get so far with a great strategy and execution, and then things happen. And I know personally, I've been there where I've done something really well. And I remember vividly my highest revenue month where I went, oh my gosh, this is it now. And I didn't take a minute to go, is this sustainable and will this be every month? And immediately allocated that to things, right? This is a family adventure we're going to go on. This is it, and letting it go. And it wasn't till I reflected that I realized, like, you can't hold on to it. You need to give it somewhere to go, to be, that's in some way for others. And I wasn't comfortable just keeping it for me. And that was a massive realization, because the strategy got it, but then it went. And I think other times I've spotted it where I'm like, no matter what I do, there's some kind of block that's like at the money bit. Once all the other work's great, get to the money bit, block comes up. Like, is that really common?
For sure. Yeah, I see that a lot, especially with women who they have a fear of holding on to money. They don't feel like they're good with money. And again, all of this is subconscious. And so we don't
Mm,
actually know that we're doing it. And so they oftentimes feel like, I need to give it away because, like, what if no, sometimes people think, well, what if there is not another high revenue month? I need to just, pay for this thing. And like, there's a lot of scarcity thinking and a lot of fear based thinking that's happening versus
mm.
tuning into, I am abundant. This is, again, safe for me to hold on to. And all of the, yeah, just more abundant ways of thinking around money kind of go out the window. And so we have to be really conscious of that and tune into that way of thinking instead of the scarcity.
Do you think so? I can understand, and I think, lots of people can understand the concept of growing up with things, scarcity phrases like money doesn't grow on trees and those kinds of things can easily program us to think that it isn't available to us, like it's not there, it's hard to obtain it. But what kinds of things would program fear of holding on to it? Like, I couldn't say I could think of a time where it was taken from me. Do you know what I mean? Or anything like that. So, what might make us as heart-centered women reluctant to, or subconsciously struggle to hold on to that money and keep it?
Yeah, so it's a worthiness thing. I was listening to Elizabeth Gilbert actually talking about this specifically with Oprah. She was being interviewed about her new book. And she said when Eat, Pray, Love came out and obviously was a huge success and she had more money than she ever dreamed of, she actually went through her hometown in New Jersey and was actually handing out money to random people on the street because she was so uncomfortable with that level of wealth and abundance. And she, again, she didn't have the capacity, she has the capacity to receive it, but to hold on to it. And she didn't see herself as somebody who was wealthy. And so it made her incredibly uncomfortable. And I thought
Mhm.
that was so interesting because how often, again, someone who was able to attract the abundance, in an amazing, great way and do something that really impacted the world, but then she didn't feel worthy of receiving the money. And so that's
Mhm.
really the main thing that I see with people. And again, they might not know that they're feeling unworthy, but there's a level of, I'm not deserving of this. Or maybe there was a belief from family that we aren't actually wealthy. We're not the type of people that get rich. And so there's a
Mhm.
fear of, who am I if I'm wealthy and my parents aren't, or my siblings aren't? Or what is my husband or spouse going to think if I make all this money? Who am I in that relationship? I had, when I was living in London, I had this, I was an assistant for this female entrepreneur. And she said to me once, she's like, she knew my big dreams. And she said, aren't you worried that your husband's going to leave you if you make more money than him? And I was like, no, that's so interesting. But I thought about the other day because clearly that was her belief system. She was single. And, there's just all these things that we don't think about. And, to your point, when people receive a lot of money and they don't know what to do with it, it can be very challenging. And so that's
Mhm.
why I love to work with people on, remembering that money needs a purpose. And that's designed to help you understand, where you want to put your money when it does come in, and also to give you peace of mind that, like, let's think about this in advance. Do you want to have money set aside for savings? Like, what are the things, what are the pockets and the reasons for the abundance? And then we can also work on some of the worthiness pieces.
That is so interesting, so interesting. And I think the deserving piece and the what if, like, definitely it's attached to identity, isn't it? It's like, who am I if? I think, if you don't need someone to look after you because you are financially independent, then what happens? And I do think that for me there was some stuff around loss, and it's that if when you've lost people, suddenly then going, well, if I don't need anybody, then what if I have nobody? And
Mhm.
so it can be so many layers deep, can't it? And I can understand why it's so hard to find. I always say with this kind of work, like this, the deep stuff that isn't obvious to us, this is where working with somebody who knows what questions to ask you and can help you peel back those layers is so valuable, because we don't know the questions to ask ourselves. And that's the whole your whole point. Otherwise, we would know the answers. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have one of those gifts, and I'm sure you do as well, where you can see where people are blocked when they come to you. And it's very obvious, especially after doing this work for 11 years. And it's very powerful to have that perspective because, again, you could be implementing all the strategy in the world, but you're capping your potential and your capacity to receive more wealth and abundance. It's like you have this wealth thermostat and it's only set to a certain number. And
mm,
obviously, people want to be able to increase that number. But there's also another block around expansion. I call it the expansion edge, because oftentimes people are saying that they want next level success, but in reality, it freaks them out. And again, they think about all the what ifs around them being successful, and what are their parents going to think? And there's all these stories that they have that are creating a very shaky foundation, and they really need a solid foundation to be able to build their business upon.
I think it's massive when you consider how lots of the ambitious women that you and I, put ourselves around, we have big goals. Like, this isn't just well, enough to pay the bills and have a few vacations here and there. It's big goals. And it can be easy to sit behind your laptop and dream and create things for these big goals. But when it becomes real, like, if you are to step into the arena where those big goals are your reality, you are going to shift in who you are or who you're showing up as. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that's really unsettling. Like you said, it's that big question mark over, who am I then? Who will I be? Who is that version of me? It's unfamiliar. It's not been done before. So you can't possibly know what that looks like, and the potential vulnerabilities, I guess, that come with that next level. Like, what is it like when people break through that upper ceiling limit?
Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing to witness. And I think the biggest thing for people, if you're in that place where you have big dreams and you're questioning, what is it going to look like? Who will I be? Is literally start to envision that and map it out and see yourself as that person. Really think about specifics. So, what type of house do you want to be living in? What type of car? Clothes? How do you want to be? What sort of food do you want to be buying? What support do you want, whether it's personally or on your team if you have a business? Really play that whole tape through, as one of my coaches used to say, and pay attention to the fears and the insecurities that come up for you, because we want to identify those to be able to move through them so that you can actually reach that place and feel good about it and not self sabotage. There's a reason why so many lottery winners end up right where they started, because they don't know how to handle that next level and they bring themselves back to that foundational, that baseline that they're used to and they're comfortable with.
Mm.
So we want to get clear on, like, what is that actual vision? And then when you really, future cast yourself into that place, how does it feel? What comes up for you? What thought processes, etc. And obviously, I've seen people shift themselves into the next level and be able to handle it and be able to, manage that level of success, but they're still very aware of their thoughts and their fears and their doubts that are continuously coming up because there are things, I have a client who she now takes a helicopter in New York City to avoid the traffic, right? Like she had to
Awesome.
avoid she had to work through some of the blocks around that and what comes up for people when they make that level of investment, or now she has a private chef, like all of that stuff. And so to have the tools at the very beginning of your journey with wealth and abundance is obviously really important, and equally continuously using them as you're up leveling is very powerful and essential as well.
Would that be why it's so often like generational? Like it's on a loop because,
Yeah.
like you say, if it's that deep set, and even if you work through it and break through to new levels, that you've got to work on the stuff that's so ingrained in you to not sort of slip back to who I guess you came here as at your core. Like it must be, and as you said, lottery winners, they haven't gone through the growth and the development. It's come out of the blue suddenly. Like I really do believe that, money matches identity. And if you haven't changed your identity, how are you going to hold on to the money and so on? But is that why it goes through in generations then? Because then you'll project your things onto your children and just so on. And it's, yeah, just
Yeah,
around.
there's a few things with that. So, there's a lot of challenges for children who are given a lot of money, just like lottery winners from a spiritual perspective, because there's a lack of deserving. Like, I
Mm,
haven't worked for this. I haven't, I haven't done anything to deserve it, so to speak. That's not everyone across the board, but we do see that when it comes to wealth and abundance, which is super interesting. And, I'm not like a spiritual mentor by any means, but it's something I've started to learn more about. But there's also, like to your point, there's generational programming that's so deep. It's like our DNA. And
mm.
you might, my husband's British, and he always talks about his grandma who experienced the effects of the war. And even when we got married at the Ritz in London, and she stayed there, it was her first time staying in a fancy hotel in her 80s, and she wouldn't even order down for a cup of tea. Like she just asked them to bring her hot water because she brought her own tea bags,
Oh,
right? So like all these little things that are normal to our parents and grandparents, that it runs deep, and we don't know that it does until we're faced with, oh, is it okay for me to order, of an 8 pound cup of English breakfast tea or pot of English breakfast tea? And those silly things like actually do add up and make a big difference to our life, one way or another. And so that's also why I'm so obsessed with this work, because I have a daughter. I know you do, you have kids as well. It's so important for us to know what we're passing down. And, to your point, the money doesn't grow on trees, or we're not, our family isn't wealthy, whatever the stories are, we have a chance to really break that and
mm,
to step into a new way of thinking and doing life. And, I don't know all the data from the UK, but at least in the US, it hasn't been that long. It was just in the 70s where women were actually allowed to have credit cards, to get a home mortgage, all the things. That's not that long ago. So
it's
even
not.
as, a gender, we have so much catching up to do. And that's why it can be even more challenging for us to be able to manage and handle money.
I think you just describing that scenario as well, though, of ordering something, I guess it shows up in interactions with people. So, feeling worthy of being able to ask something, be waited on, be,
Yes.
all of these things of being held in a way that you believe you deserve, treating respectfully staff who are there to do a job that, a luxury experience without constantly feeling that, oh no, it's fine, I'll get it, I'll do it myself. It's again a deserving thing there. I can see how that would play out. Definitely, I get the wartime grandparent thing for sure.
Yeah, and I have a lot of sensitivity towards that. Like, many of us can't imagine how that would have been to not know how you're going to buy food, and all the
Mhm.
things that she experienced and other people who are listening, your relatives experienced. And so I have a sensitivity towards that. And I also I want to be able to recognize that there's more than enough out there and abundance is available for all of us. And that was really the thing that shifted everything for me. Like I said, when I had that 54 no's in a row period, I started to get on calls with different energy after realizing I'd been blocking myself. And I started to go into them believing that everyone was abundant. And I call it my rich grandma method because I actually believe that everyone has a rich grandma who can fund their vision. And whether that's a 401k or a savings account or a spouse that can invest in their dreams or money they just forgot they had or a family member that will lend them the money. I found, especially with myself, I started my business with over 6 figures in debt. I found that I was resourceful and I was able to find the money to move forward. And thank God I did. And so when I started to approach those conversations differently and believe that everyone had the money, number one, it was way more supportive to the people on the other end of the phone because they were like, okay, well, Emily believes in me. And I literally asked them, I said, do you want me to help you find the money if they said that they didn't have it? And of course, no one's going to say no to that. So then we got to be creative and think about where they could actually find the money. And I got to see, is this really a money block or is there something else going on? Are they actually just, they don't believe that it's possible for them to start a business or they don't feel worthy of actually moving forward with their dream. They don't want to put themselves first because they're worried about, what is their spouse going to think or taking money away from the family and the kids. And so I got to actually get to the root of what was going on. And so I think it's so important that we, really take a look at, what is this money block actually about? What is this showing us? When people say, I'd love to, but I can't afford it, honestly, it's rarely about the money. It's normally something else that's going on that we get to work through and start to shift.
I think you touched on something there that I think is really important as well, and it's the narrative that you are around. Because if you are surrounded by people who believe that it's not there or that people aren't spending money, I heard just the other day somebody said, well, people can't afford it anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean people can't afford it anymore? There are billions of people. You're saying none of them can, and I get that certain things and certain target markets have to align, but if you're surrounded by people who are affirming that belief of, yeah, people can't afford that, people won't pay this, people won't, you start to believe it and you start to, come align with that level. And how do you break free from that if whether it's your family, your community, but you are surrounded by a scarcity minded environment, like, and you don't want to be like, how do you block that?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a school of thought when it comes to losing weight and getting healthy that says, don't worry about what you remove from your diet, just focus on what you're adding in, because then
Mm,
naturally you'll be less hungry for the bad stuff, right? If we focus on eating the
yeah.
good stuff and the protein and all of that, will be fuller longer and we won't have the cravings. And so I like to start there with people is look at your current social circle or your family. See, do you have people who are expanders for you? Do you have people who open your eyes to new possibilities, like the people who are taking the helicopter to and from, in New York City, or the people buying the house that you want, or driving the car that you want, or the business that you want. And oftentimes you might feel a little bit of envy towards those people, but they're expansive because they show you what's possible. Do you have those types of people in your life? Do you have people who are your cheerleaders, who believe in you, who see a bigger vision for you? If not, that's the first step. Join a group, a mastermind, get a coach, something. There's free communities, there's, networking groups, etc. Find people who are going to inspire you on a regular basis.
Mm,
Then take a look at your current social circle. Do you have people where the relationship actually might have been for a season, but it's no longer something that you want to pour into? Okay, so start to kind of phase that out, have a conversation with that person if need be. You know, limit your time with them because it's no longer serving you, and that's okay. I had a coach tell me once, some relationships are forever, some are just for a season, and some are for a reason, right? People come into your life for a reason. And so understand where you're at in terms of your relationships and what is really actually going to help propel you to the next level. And of course, there are people in your life where you can't just cut them out and you don't want to. But especially as you're working on reprogramming your mindset, you have to understand that you're more susceptible to other people's opinions. So
mm,
I always say deliberately choose, be conscious of who you're having these conversations with, especially when it comes to money or some of the hot button topics like we're talking about today. You
yeah.
can decide, I'm not going to talk about my business with my mom because she doesn't get it and doesn't understand. right? Like that's okay. You don't have to tell everyone everything. And if you
Mm.
feel like that's going to feel painful for you, then have a conversation and say, I know you don't get this, but I'd really love your support. And if you can't give me that, then we're just not going to talk about it anymore. Right.
Mm.
And draw a line in the sand. So I think it's just really important to, number one, add those expanders into your life, but also have boundaries with your current relationships.
That's so important. And I think you do see groups of people. I've definitely seen this where if somebody's struggling with something or not getting the results that they hope for, and I see this in all kinds of businesses, and other coaches have this with clients. You see it all the time. They will look for other people who are having the same challenges to reaffirm that it's not them, it's in some way the economy, the thing is broken, the process, whatever, because that feels better to have other people make you feel better for the fact that you haven't managed to shift something or haven't been able to crack something that you've been working at, and then you reel back to where you were. And people do that. Well, I think we all do that naturally. We seek affirmation that we're not broken when actually we could be seeking support to fully grow.
Totally. Yeah, that's such a great point. And of course, we don't want to feel alone, but you can choose the group that's expanding and doing the big things and plug yourself into that community versus the people that are struggling. And so
Mhm.
I think like doing an audit of the people in your life is very important, especially if you're looking to go to the next level. And, I'd much rather be the person that is the least successful in this incredible, amazing group so that I can learn and be inspired and be reminded of what's possible than the most successful in a group of people that are struggling.
Yeah,
Right. And that's not, pointing fingers or trying to say anything bad about anyone, but you just have to know what you require in order to go to the next level and what feels exciting to you.
definitely. Because it's frustrating when you can see it happening, when you can see
Yeah.
somebody that could be doing amazing things, but they're allowing themselves to be pulled into, maybe circles that aren't serving them. And you see it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many elements to this, and I get it from we've talked about environment, identity, relationships, beliefs. Like, there's all these components to wiring ourselves for abundance and to receive and to be comfortable with that. I like to picture it like there probably isn't one, but I like to picture like a laser gun that you can just like pew, and just like destroy this like blocker, like whatever it may be. Do you think there's a thing that is like one of the most powerful things to hit that money blocker right where it hurts and make it go away? Or is it really there is no one big thing?
So there's one practice that I absolutely love, and I'll share it because I think it's life changing. So oftentimes we're making decisions based on fear or from fear without
Mm,
knowing it. And so one of my core beliefs is that our desires are truth. And so I help women shift into desire led living versus fear based living. And
mm,
especially when it comes to money, often fear is running the show. And so I often ask people, think about a number that's your goal. So, for example, if you had 10 million pounds in the bank or whatever the number is, 20 million, that feels really expansive for you, 100 million, or if your business was at $1 billion, right? The really big numbers. If you had that in the bank right now, what decision would you be making? How would you be living your life? How would you be showing up? Who would you be spending time with? How would you be spending your time? All of those questions. What clothes would you be wearing? What food would you be buying? And I'm not saying go and spend a ton of money to get to that level right now, but I find that that really helps me remove the fear and also step into the next level vision of my life and
mm,
adopt my wealthiest identity because I can actually see who that person is and I can start to make some changes right now that help me get to that place. And you might realize like it's actually not as far off as you think. And you might not go from like somebody, you might not be completely different person and to, have like a huge, blow up of your life. It might just be that like you have a more expansive wardrobe, you wear more Chanel, whatever, but you could start to go to Chanel right now and actually try on the clothes. You could, make a connection with one of the people who work at the store and they could invite you to the special Chanel viewings. I don't know, I'm just making
yeah.
stuff up, but like start to step into that version of you now. Stop waiting to buy the furniture that you want. Start to decorate the home that you have in the way that you want it to look, even if you don't have the dream house yet. test drive the car that you desire, pick out the car that you would want to buy when your money comes in, like all that stuff. It can make such a huge difference. And I call that micro upgrades. But you're only going to know what your micro upgrades are if you go to that next level vision and you also start making decisions from that future version of yourself.
That's awesome. And I think it's simple enough to do, but we're like almost afraid to do it half the time, because when you say 10 billion, 20 billion, like million, billion, whatever,
Yeah.
it becomes a blur because it's so wild and huge that it doesn't feel like, 10 million and 20 million doesn't sound like any different to me. It sounds
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just a lot, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if you're somebody who's closer to that, then you can see the gap and it's very different. But we have an amazing conversation here about money. Money is the topic of this, right? There will be people that listen that go, because we are from heart-centered backgrounds, that will go, but it's not even about the money. Money's not the thing. I do what I do because I want to make a difference and I want to make an impact. And I'm here for that. I know you are too. But I'm very much about and. It's not either or. And actually, you need to be in a good place with money and receiving to be able to sell, to be able to serve, to be able to fulfill that mission and make that impact. Like, they're completely connected. So when people push this away and go, oh no, money, I'm not in it for money, what would be your message to somebody that's feeling that way about this conversation?
Yeah, beautiful. So before I answer that, just to come back to the initial conversation, if the number that I threw out is too much for you, pick a number that feels aligned with where you're at. Maybe it's 500,000 in the bank. Maybe it's 200,000 in the bank. Whatever like your expansive number is right now, because we don't want it to feel so unbelievable that you can't actually get yourself into that place. You want to
Mm,
really envision, who would the $500,000 woman look like? What would she, would she be showing up, etc. Okay, so
yeah.
I just want to point that out
Yeah,
first.
no, yeah, great point.
Yeah. And so, okay, to answer your question, I love this question. Beautiful. So, the best way I can answer this is, I had a client back in the day. We used to do our big events at the Ritz in London because obviously it's a special place to me where I got married. And there were people who would fly in from the US, and it was a big deal for them to even be in the room. And to many of them just got a passport for the first time. So it was a really big up level. I remember one woman in particular, she had a plan for her business and we mapped out, I think it was like a $700,000 year. And she got really uncomfortable. She's a very religious person. And she said, but this is so greedy. Like, I don't know that I can handle this. I don't know if I feel worthy of this. She was very honest. And what we did is we actually attached a purpose to the money. And a big part of her work was wanting to also start a charity. And so a lot of the money that she created from that business was going to go to the charity as well. She put some other things on there, like a new car, a new house, et cetera, all the things that she desired personally. But a lot of her wealth she wanted to devote to giving back.
Mm,
And so what I think is really important is that people start to identify what is the purpose for the money,
mm,
because it's not just for the clothes and the car and the house and the things that are self-serving, so to speak. There's other reasons and ways in which your business can support, whether it is a charity or your children going to the best schools, or you're creating generational wealth for grandkids and great grandkids to come. Like, really envision what the money is for and what the purpose of the money is for and how you could impact the world in a really powerful way. And the other thing that I'll say here is, think about what's required for your business to be able to grow and actually impact clients. I have a whole little thread with ChatGPT that's all about my legacy work. And so the other day I was mapping out my dream team within my business and what's really going to be required in order for me to be able to bring that to fruition and actually get there. And it's a lot of people. And it's a lot of revenue needed to be able to bring on some amazing team members that will help me impact millions of people around the world.
mm,
And so just be real with yourself. Like, if you're keeping yourself small right now and you're telling yourself you don't want to make a lot of money, well, you're basically lessening the impact that you're going to be able to have in the world. What if you had a bigger marketing budget so that you could spread your message? What if you had everyone doing the stuff that you don't want to be doing in the business? So you could be on the podcast, or you could be writing the book, or you could be spending more time with your kids.
mm.
Just think about the cost of you not dreaming big and seeing a bigger vision for yourself financially. And I think that that will help you shift.
Definitely. And like you just described there with the team as well, that would be people who get to go and do the thing that they love doing and
Exactly.
to earn from it. Like you're creating jobs, if you like, but
Yeah.
opportunities for people to go and shine and be amazing at what they do and get compensated well for that and be part of something. So yeah, I love that vision. It's all about
Yeah.
vision, isn't it? It's all about
Yeah, it really is. And just a lot of people don't want to go there because they're like, oh, but I don't want to be disappointed because what if it doesn't happen? And again,
mm,
that's such a huge, powerful limiting belief that's holding so many people back. You have the opportunity to step into, but what if it does happen?
mm,
That's just as easy to envision as the what if it doesn't. Okay. And so our mind is programmed to choose one or the other because it wants to keep us safe. But in reality, that safe is just, again, it's just a program that it's been running or a playlist. So you have to do the work to be able to start to shift that and have it a more abundant way of thinking and more naturally shift to that side of the spectrum versus the lack side. And it's not an overnight thing, but hopefully this conversation is giving people some steps so that they can start
yeah.
to make that adjustment.
That was going to be my question actually, is how quickly can this work have impact? How quickly can somebody shift in a way that they notice in the bank account?
Yeah. Well, it's making those decisions. Like I was saying, one single decision can shift everything. When I started my business, like I said, I was so in debt, but my husband lent me his credit card and we signed up for the first program that helped me build my business. And I went from $442 all the way up to seven figures in 18 months. And
Yeah.
so obviously that was quite dramatic and really fast. And I was working a lot. Like I don't want to sugarcoat it by any means, but that was way more than I thought that I would ever be able to do. And I really attribute that to the money mindset work that I did because, like I said, I started with 54 no's in a row. But once I started to get comfortable even talking about money and started to work on my own limiting beliefs, people could feel that and they could feel that my energy was different. It was more expansive. I believed in them. I saw something different for them. And
Yeah.
so it can happen quickly, especially if you start to make decisions from that place of abundance.
Mm.
And you start paying attention to how even those micro upgrades shift your life. I didn't start off spending a ton of money besides that program that we invested in, but I would do things like buy myself flowers once a month. I would even, there was a hot yoga class that I really wanted to go to, but I was telling myself I couldn't afford it. Well, I looked and I saw, okay, they have a special for 3 free classes, right, for trials. So I'll go and do that. And then eventually was able to purchase the actual, full membership. So little things that you can get yourself, that you can do to shift yourself into your next level, you can do that immediately. And then just pay attention to how it makes you feel, how it raises your vibration, the opportunities that you start to attract into your life. Even tracking money, I still track money every single day. I track all the money that comes to me in my business, but also from other ways, whether it's like an unexpected refund or a gift, a monetary gift, or, like even little things like if I find a quarter on the street, I'll pick it up. Like
Yeah.
it sounds so silly, but paying attention to money and recognizing that it's there all the time is very powerful.
I love that. Actually, I think even just a coin, like you said, on the street, there will be people. I've been this person who has at times thought, no, I'm not going to pick that up. That's I in some way shouldn't. Somebody needs it more than me, and I shouldn't. Or also, I'm not that desperate. You know, all the beliefs about a coin on the street. A kid wouldn't have a second thought about it. A child would just go, "Wow, look at this! Is so lucky." Like you've taken something that was somebody else's. No, it was lost, and
Yeah.
it's okay. Like the crazy stories we tell ourselves. Hey.
I know. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I saw an interview with Lewis Howes talking about that. He was in New York City and he just decided to play kind of like a little game with himself and say, money is coming to me. I don't know what the exact phrase was, but like all day and every way or something. And he kept seeing coins. And at first he was like, oh my gosh, this is disgusting. I'm not going to pick this up because it's the streets of New York. And what are we doing? But he decided to change that and he picked one up and it was actually a really rare coin. And so later on, he researched it and it was actually being sold for over $4,000. Yeah, online. And that story always sticks out to me because I'm like, we have all these narratives and we don't deserve it. And but like if that's one example, but how is that playing out in other areas of your life that you're not deserving, that somebody else wants it more, that you're taking from somebody else? So how we do one thing is how we do everything.
Definitely. And even if it is little, like it's a penny in this,
Yeah.
you feel like well, I don't need it. It's okay. You can still have it, and if it all adds up, right? It's
And
the
it represents
concept.
something more, it represents a respect for money. I always like to think about money as a relationship. And so, are you like, oh no, that's not good enough for me, or that's disgusting? Or when you're receiving a gift from like, think about with your spouse. If you received a gift from your spouse and you were like, oh, I don't want this, like, they're going to be a lot more hesitant to give you something in the future. And it's the same thing with the universe. So, how are you currently relating to money as a relationship? And how is that blocking your next level of abundance?
So powerful. And this is lifetime work, isn't it? Like you could be listening to this in your 20s or in your 50s or beyond. It's never too late, it's never too early. There's always a shift that you can make, right?
Totally. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, actually, and this memory popped into my head of when my mom bought me Abercrombie and Fitch clothes as a teenager. And I remember her telling me, like, don't tell your dad because I wasn't supposed to spend this money. And like, my dad made a lot of money. Like, we weren't poor by any means. And still, but he had thoughts in his mind about what was, a lot of money for his kids' clothes. And my mom has a tendency to overgive. And that's her love language. And so I was taught, don't tell your dad. And like she always was like ashamed for having expensive taste. And then that was passed on to me, ashamed for having expensive taste. I used to see my grandma hide shoe boxes that she purchased from my grandpa. And so like all these narratives, and like I said, that Abercrombie and Fitch story popped into my mind just yesterday. And I've been doing this work for 11 years.
Hmm.
And so it's very powerful. And obviously I have the tools now to be able to work through that. But that's why I say, doing this work, it's amazing to do when you're first starting, wherever you're at in terms of business. If you're an entrepreneur, even if you're not, doesn't matter. But it's really lifetime work. And it might feel challenging in the beginning, but then just like when you work out, it's challenging when you're getting into it, but then you have more of like a maintenance and more of a
Yeah.
routine, and you're more used to it as you go along.
So just a closing thought then on this. If you are further along and you're looking back now and going, oh, I should have this, I wish I'd that, like a sense of regret, like of different choices you could have made. How do you, I guess, shift that from regret to learning and knowing that you can still make changes? Because I know people who are further along in their timeline and business that would go, really should have done this sooner. Like, yeah, or made choices perhaps that weren't the best choices, but you only know that with hindsight. So, what would be a message to somebody at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I can say is, so a few years ago in 2022, I nearly lost everything. So I had this mastermind implode, lost $250,000. We had just moved into a brand new house, bought all the furniture. I was 6 weeks pregnant. And so I literally had to restart in many ways and move back to my hometown, sold our house, etc. And so there's a lot of things that I look back on where I'm like, okay, I could have done that differently. I've invested over $600,000 in masterminds and coaches, etc. Obviously could have bought a house with that. And so there's a lot of things that we don't know. And I just have to trust, just like everyone else, that I'm learning everything in the right time and
Mhm.
be grateful that this information has come into your life now. That's when it was supposed to come into your life.
Yeah.
And I really believe that everything is for us. And so, that example, I've been sharing that publicly for the last few years, and that has served so many people. And so that was a part of my journey for the reason. It's now a part for a reason. Now it's part of my message. Now it's part of, another gift that money mindset has given to me because I was able to move through that with such strength in a way that I wouldn't have without these tools. And
Mhm.
so, everything has been, happening for you and unfolding as it was meant to. And so just showing gratitude and stepping into abundance, right?
Yeah.
Scarcity thinking will tell us we're too late, or we should have known
Mhm.
this, or we did it wrong. But
Mhm.
abundance thinking is, I'm right on time. This is perfect. This is unfolding exactly as it's meant to.
And sometimes it is the lesson, isn't it? Like I even you saying that's just made me remember a time when I was younger, and I had a really great investment in my hands and I let it go. Look at that pattern. But I didn't see what I had at the time. I didn't know. I was really young. I was in my early 20s. I had no idea. Of course I didn't. Why would I? Nobody had taught me what was right there in front of me. And actually how great that I can see it. And I think when my son was only about 10, I told him this story and he's never forgot. Like he gets and I said, if I had known this and I could have done this, I've imparted that wisdom already. Like that's, and that's valuable wisdom. So like you say, we do and make the decisions and we do the best we can with the information and the skills and the know-how and the tools and the resources that we have at the time. But yeah, we can take that forward and learn from them. And yeah, it's
For sure.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I think a lot of challenges are also expanding our capacity to receive. And I often think about that. There's a spiritual mentor that I love learning from, and he talks about how just like in school, right, you graduate and then you're in the next group, but you're actually at the bottom.
Mm,
So the challenges are us going to the next level, but we might feel like we're at the bottom and starting over, but we're really at the next level, just at the bottom of the next level. And so
yeah.
just reframing your thinking around any way you feel like you're behind or you messed it up or you didn't do it the way it should have been, that's not serving you. And so moving into acceptance and trust in the process.
So good. Forgiveness as well, isn't it? And just, yeah. Oh, what a great conversation, Emily. I just love this topic. I think it's really important. I don't think it's talked about enough. I think it gets glossed over with too many kind of cliches and not actually deeply, brought to the surface. And it's something that everybody needs and repeatedly. So thank you for having this conversation with me today and helping unpick these things.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.
Total pleasure. So we're going to put the links to where people can find you in the show notes. But if anyone's desperate to ask you a question, where's the best place for them to find you?
So if you go to iheartmylife.com, you'll see all of our courses, my membership. Specifically, there's iHeart Money, which is our self-study course around money mindset. And you can also message me on Instagram at Emily Williams.
Amazing. There you go. All those links in the show notes. And once again, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, go out there and shine your light bright because you were born to be brilliant.